Welcome everyone. Today we're going to finally be talking about Champions Chapter 2, Power, which, believe it or not, I actually only just got to playing 2 days. So I'm going to sum up the lore, talk a little bit about the mechanics, my current thoughts on dragon response missions, just about everything I can do to review this patch. And hey, maybe doing it a little bit late is a good thing. It gives you guys more time to digest it as well. We can have some good back and forth on the comments. I do actually think we'll probably end up having 2 videos on this subject material, because this patch ends with a big mystery that I'm really kind of into. As a little bit of a side note as well, you guys might hear that I sound a little bit different today. I'm trying a new thing with my mic where I up the gain really heavily, and that forces me to be a bit quieter and less shouty. So no, I'm not depressed, no, I'm not upset, I'm not miserable, I'm not sick. I'm just doing a slightly different style with the way I speak into the mic. Anyway, so let's jump on in. The patch opens with a little bit of a pre-chat sequence. You might remember from the previous episode, they actually gave us a whole like fighting sequence to do that wasn't a dragon response mission. Well, that doesn't happen this time. The only fight-oriented content in this whole patch is rolled into the dragon response mission format. So all of it's replayable, all of it's got achievement and currency value to it, all of it you can play with multiple people. They absolutely waste no effort here, and I think that's good. But there are some little talky sequences that you do get to experience. So that's kind of where we open up at the Eye of the North. We get one of these amazing scenes again with Jormag speaking to Aurene. I loved these when we were first learning about the Primordus threat, and just the idea of Bangar being used as a puppet for the Elder Dragon narratively is just so genius, because it's meant that for all of the Elder Dragons we fought so far, we've had so little opportunity to interact with them. And now with Jormag, we've got a way of doing it a ton, but without also becoming desensitized to the fear of being in the presence of an Elder Dragon, right? They don't have to have a massive Elder Dragon there all the time. It can just be us and Bangar, this puppet, and it works. I mean, Aurene's an Elder Dragon, I know, but she's super young and diminutive and all of that. Anyway, I've got to say as well, I love Bangar too. Bangar really doesn't have much to say in this patch. But there is a brief moment in the middle where the commander really wants to talk to him. It seems like the commander might be onto something, and then we get distracted and it never occurs. So I hope that the studio has big plans for Bangar. I'm not joking here when I would say I think Bangar is my favourite character, and I think by a really long way as well. I love that guy, and I don't care whether he has a big redemption arc or what, I just don't want him to fizzle out, because he's incredible. So in this conversation, we see Jormag kind of bargaining with Aurene and discussing like Aurene's nature. They set up this cool thing where it's basically like, look, Aurene does want to talk to Jormag because they're both as fascinated with each other as we as the audience are watching them talk. But Aurene knows that Jormag is persuasive and kind of doesn't want to be there in that conversation without the commander also being there as a support, which I think is a great idea, and it means we get to listen to what they say. They have kind of thrown this concept of Aurene as like the healing dragon on us a bit hard this patch. I know it's not totally left field. I know, like, if you look at Kralkatorrik's emergence zone and what Aurene has supposedly done to all the areas of the brand and stuff, she's kind of healed in a way. But I never really got the impression of her being, like, a dragon of healing. Like, that was a defining principle of her until now when they're talking about it in this way. And anyway, Jormag makes the point that, like, Aurene, what are you doing? You're letting people just damage each other and destroy one another just so that you get to heal them? Like, what is that? For a lot of this conversation, and in fact just a lot of the patch, I have this weird feeling that so many of the conversations we're witnessing are gonna look funny or really ironic or just telling or sneaky when we watch them in retrospect after End of Dragons. Like, every time the commander says, we'll figure it out, we've managed to every time, I feel like they're really playing with us there. And Aurene has a similar comment at the beginning of this patch. So the first controversy is at Ebonhawk. That's the opening instance. Destroyers have attacked and we need to go help them out. They have this very cool idea that Krisha wants to assist with the Char forces that are in the area. This is Ascalon. But because she's an Imperator, it's kind of like this big political play, this big move to actually have her in the city. I really liked that. The fact that ArenaNet had thought of that and that got voiced and put it in as like a point of contention really, to me, feels like they did a lot of due diligence thinking about Ebonhawk and what is actually at stake here, and I was very impressed with it. Nonetheless, the people of Ebonhawk do allow her to get in, and the point is that we save the city. Nice concept art on the loading screen as we move through. And well, it's a dragon response mission. It feels pretty much on par quality-wise with the ones we did previously. I will say the format is slightly different. Like, it's not a long escort in which we get a lot of background dialogue, which I complimented fervently before. This one is more of a broad, go do what you want to do defense event, where you could end up spreading out quite a lot. All the DRMs of this patch do end with boss fights, some of them stronger than others. This one's okay, and actually they have a really nice ground telegraph moment where pretty much everywhere is going to be an instant kill zone unless you stand in the right spot. It was something I figured out pretty quick. If you watch the footage closely, you'll see I'm actually a party with someone else. The way I played this patch was on my own, completely on my own, joining the public instances way after the patch released. So what you're actually looking at there, and what my experience was today, is kind of the general population of dragon response missions. And for this one in particular, I think I only had the one ally. So it scaled for a two-man situation. The scaling and the balance felt totally appropriate to me. And he did seem a little bit newer at the game. He did seem to struggle with where to go and what to do a bit more. But it was pretty fun. And, you know, I got to invite him to a party. I wish the game had always been like this. This is that feeling I want in a social, cooperative game where I'm playing through the story and I'm basically made a friend here. You know, if I wasn't just recording and actually I was engaging in chat a bit more, I could have really got to know this person. They could have joined my guild. We could have done any number of things. This is really good, and every single instance that I played, there were always other players. Some of them decent at the game, some of them not so decent at the game. Break bars I actually find in particular to be the one super frustrating mechanic. I've noticed that people really struggle with break bars, and that's not a problem with DRMs, that's a problem with Corteria. And I've also noticed people struggle to like see extra mechanics. So for example, in this patch, there's lots of Charzukas you can pick up. These are environmental objects that are really good and you should pick up and use, but players kind of don't. In one of the missions, there was an opportunity to pick up a Dragon's Blood Spear, I'll talk more about in a second, to help with a break bar. And once I saw they were there, you can watch in the footage, I figure it out and I start going for it. But I think most other players are so focused on their skill bars and like dodge rolling and stuff, because there's so many skills to use and everything's so fast in Guild Wars 2, that they're blind to like everything else that's going on. And it's hard to communicate with people in this game as well, because the combat is so fast. This isn't like a classic MMO, which is slow paced enough that you can read chat and type in chat. Most people, that's just way beyond their ability. So if they're struggling with the mechanics, you just kind of got to watch them struggle, and there's no real way of helping them out. If there was in-game voice over IP, maybe that would be better, but hey, we're way off subject about DRMs right now. Overall, I liked the Ebonhawk stuff. There's just not much to say. What I did appreciate is once the DRM was over, I had the opportunity to speak to some of the characters that were present, like Krisha. This does not exist in the other DRMs. Now, if you guys are keeping up with news about the game, you watched the recent ArenaNet live stream, they did basically confirm that the budget for Icebrood Saga was kind of cut, and they moved everyone over to the expansion, so these dragon response missions are kind of the scramble approach to get the story where they want it to be. And I think this patch, for the first time, I'm really starting to feel that there is a bit of a drop, because in the first instance here, for Ebonhawk, there's lots of bonus dialogue. In all the other instances, there is not. It's very on rails, it's very minimal in terms of extra interactions you can get. And I think that's fine. I think the story still plays out perfectly well, but it means that this Ebonhawk one is the only time you really get to dive a bit deeper into the subject material. And they do really well with it, for what it's worth. If you talk to Krisha, you get a lot of stuff about like char politics, what's going on with the High Legions. A lot of what they're saying in the story right now kind of feels like they're maybe setting up to have Krisha or someone else be Kana. Like, they might actually be trying to do a Kana story here in the Icebrood Saga. I don't know whether that will really go. But Krisha has like a suggestion here that the current High Legions, the United High Legions, that we spent so much time with on Drizzlewood, might be fracturing. You hear a little bit more about the new Iron Imperator, though they're not really on screen at any point. And the other thing I would say is it really kind of feels like they're closing the whole Ebonhawk/Char conflict thing. You know, they even mentioned that it's been over 10 years since the book Ghosts of Ascalon and the treaty signing and all of that. 10 years. And so now it seems a bit ridiculous that the people living there haven't eased up. And it's funny how much of that is real world time that has actually passed in the MMO. And so it does make sense that they're trying to close out that story. It's just a shame, I think, that in all these years Guild Wars 2's been out, we never really got to deep dive into that. You know, point in case, it really says something that there's no Ebonhawk representative in this mission. Like, you don't get to speak to Commander Samuelson, you don't really get to speak to any of the fallen angels. There's no one there that's really representing these people. It's like a weird extra city at this point, because they just haven't really fleshed it out. It had the most done between Guild Wars 1 and 2, and then it's just sort of sat there. Not even Path of Fire, introducing the Crystal Desert, actually did anything with Ebonhawk, despite the fact there's a gate right next to Ebonhawk that takes us down south to the Crystal Desert. It's funny, but hey, they at least put a little bit of it into the Icebrood Saga, and I do respect and I'm happy with that. Next mission, we have Thunderhead, and wow, I'm really mixed on this one, because in some ways this is incredible. What a great location to pick, somewhere from Season 4, and we're going to go to a Season 3 location as well in this patch, so I adore that. They do some incredibly cool stuff with those environments. Even though I'm playing with really low graphics at the moment, I could still tell that this place under attack by the destroyers was pretty transformed. Like, when I first loaded into this Dragon Response mission, I kind of didn't know where I was. I didn't recognize the place. They had like that big door that opens during this mission. Does that actually happen in the regular game? Like, is that not something new they're doing with that prop? It feels really fresh, and I love that they picked this forge as a place that one of the dragons would choose to attack. Everything about this makes so much sense. So they introduced a new character here as well. How do we pronounce his name? He's a Norn Myron or whatever. I'm not really sure why they felt this is the time to be introducing a new character. Perhaps this was someone that they had always had the idea the Saga was going to go for, and then they never got round to it in the end, so, but here he is anyway. I do like the character though, and at least he's talking about the Norn transforming. Like, he talks about how sometimes he's a bear. Again, I complimented that before, I'll compliment it again. It's a big part of the Norn, and the more that they shine a light on it, the better. I adored that. So why is this, what really defines this mission? Well, the dwarves. Guys, it feels very weird to me that I'm about to say what I'm about to say. Buried over 10 minutes into a video about a part of a Living World patch. The dwarves are here. This has been something I've been waiting for since the launch of Guild Wars 2. I've always imagined this beat, this moment, to be a part of an expansion about Primordus and about the depths of Tyria. The moment that the dwarves come into the story is like a big resolution and a point of anticipation for me. And, well, here it is. It's now, and it's a part of the Icebrood Saga. I really view this, and the whole introduction of Primordus as a part of this saga too, I view this as saying, look, there's not going to be a Primordus expansion. There's not going to be a Depths of Tyria expansion. We never really want to focus on the dwarves. So they're just kind of here now, and there is a moment, I think, in the DRM where you burst through, you see that all the destroyers are in the chamber, but they're already occupied. And why are they occupied? It's because they're fighting the dwarves, and I think you're supposed to walk onto like this precipice, looking down over a cliff, and be amazed. Well, I missed that cinematic aspect. I'd sort of walked down, I wasn't with the NPCs. I heard it in the dialogue, but by the time I actually got a good look, I think it was a bit too late. And I kind of missed out, I think, which is a shame. But so what do they do with this idea that the dwarves have come in? Obviously, there was the Global World event with the launch of this episode as well. But beyond that, not much, really. So Ogden's there with the Priory and, you know, defending Thunderhead, as you'd expect. So Ogden's a part of the story, but then once the other dwarves are around, you don't really get to hear Ogden interact with them. Like, that's what I would have loved. I would have loved to hear Ogden as a surface dwarf, which is quite remarkable, talking to many of these subterranean dwarves. That's a big thing. But Ogden doesn't really have the time to say anything. Wiki says that Roban, apparently, is in this instance. That's the dwarf from Season 3 that we met on Ember Bay. He was just a head back then. And I never saw him in there, but Wiki does say he's there. So that's a nice little touch, I guess, as well. And that's it, really, except one new dwarf who gets a name. All the others have kind of generic names. This new dwarf is called Locke Stonehealer. So remember, is Ogden Stonehealer? So this guy's called Locke Stonehealer. Like, they're suggesting he's a relative or something. That's amazing. What a cool idea. Yeah, let's hear them chat. Look, it's a long-lost cousin of yours, Ogden. But there is no dialogue. So, I mean, I'm in two minds here. I kind of want to criticize the story for not giving me more, but I have to accept that they could have just left Locke with a generic name. At least they gave us that cool little hint, that cool little mystery, and, you know, maybe we'll dive into it a bit more in the future. So the idea here is that the dwarves are fighting a ton of newly active destroyers, and the destroyers have been rallied, it seems, because of Jormag's awakening. We've got this idea of the twinning between the dragons, and as of this patch, I think the idea is still that Primordus is asleep, but the destroyers are going a bit crazy. And in fact, there's a very cool little description of how Primordus is actually, in a way, getting stronger than Jormag. It's kind of like the fire dragon is like wildfire, getting out of control. They give you this idea that the destroyers are really rampant and creating a lot of energy, which is going back to the Elder Dragon, making them stronger, making them more rampant, and then even more energy's coming in, and it's sort of scaling and getting out of control exponentially. And I think that's very cool. You know, that's like how wildfire spreads, and it's very fitting for Primordus. It makes Primordus seem strong, and that's what I always want with these patches, Primordus to seem as strong as possible. But nonetheless, we the heroes will prevail. We travel through to the Forge. This mission hints a lot more again at Bram's connection with the destroyers. I really do like this idea that Bram will become some kind of champion for Primordus. Thus, he's destined to destroy Jormag, and they'll destroy each other, cancel each other out, whatever the situation is there. But we do get the idea that Bram knows they're at the Forge, even though the dwarves didn't have to say that that's where they'd originally risen. I like the idea that Primordus is attacking the Dragon's Blood Spear Forge as well, because this was like an Achilles heel in a way for Kralkatorrik, and maybe it could be repurposed for Primordus, and he finds that a threat. And in fact, in the boss fight here, we can recollect those Dragon's Blood Spears, but we can augment them somehow through the power of Aurene and the prismatic magic to maybe actually have them work against destroyers. And so, yeah, we utilize them. I was really wondering if this story instance would have the Forge be destroyed. Like, you could maybe have a small victory, but Primordus takes it out. But they don't do that. We do actually save the Forge, and you never know. Maybe it will come in handy once again in a new dragon battle down in the future. There really isn't much more to say on the story on this one, I'm afraid, because, as I say, there's no after-mission dialogue, which I really hate. Oh, if I could have traded away... The Ebonhawk one was good, but if I could have traded one for the other, I definitely would have had this. I want to talk to the Deljamor. Tell me about Jarlis. Tell me about some of those other characters. There's just no conversation. And so I'm, like, on two minds. Like, I love that this has happened, but in the same way, I feel like it wasn't explored enough. Please, in another patch, I hope that they've got it planned out, that there'll be more. As far as dragon response missions go, by the way, it really struck me during the Thunderhead mission, which once again is like this escort style we saw in the previous patch. Again, just how much I adore this format. Now look, I know that they're kind of getting a bad rap at the moment. They're getting a bad rap because they're being used as a substitute for the traditional Living World patches that we expect with the new maps and so on. And they're getting a bit of a bad rap because they're a part of the Icebrood Saga that was saying it was going to be expansion-like, and we're obviously really far away from that. I get that. But to look at them for what they actually are, I see them resolving one of the problems ArenaNet's had for years, and that's that they keep reinventing the wheel in their Living World instances to try and keep them interesting and entertaining. Like the amount of new mechanics and replacement skill bars and just crazy fancy stuff that they had to throw into every single Living World instance we've had, like through the entirety of Season 4. Is just mental to me, and how many we never end up returning to. In Dragon Response missions, do you know what they lean on? The combat system. It's Guild Wars 2 combat with Guild Wars 2 builds over and over and over again. You know, earlier in the week, I wanted to get you guys some good Hollow footage, and I didn't really know what to do, so I kicked up some Season 2 gameplay. I thought, I like Dry Top, I'll play some Season 2, that can be some background footage. And do you know what happened when I went into Season 2? I remembered something. That most of those instances back then were just standing around listening to dialogue for ages and ages, until finally you'd get maybe a little fight, and then they throw some weird, like, silly mechanic at you that is you know, replacing and exchanging the combat system. So I don't really get to play Hollow, and it's not satisfying. DRMs, on the other hand, you know, I go in there and I'm playing Guild Wars 2 and I'm really experiencing what I enjoy about the game's combat. And they're leaning on what was always one of their best assets, the combat system. So I've had a real joy. Yes, there's stuff like the Charzukas and, you know, the Mastery, but they really are just supplements to a core experience that I think they've got very tight, and I want them to keep doing this kind of stuff, man. I think it's really good. Oh, finally, about Thunderhead, I've got to compliment the name of the Destroyer boss at the end. He's got a cool, unique design. I already talked about that in the trailer video. But the Destroyer of the Last Forge. Oh, well done, ArenaNet. You remember how to name those Destroyer minions. That's some good stuff. Right, so next instance, we get the Council Chambers in Ratsum. This is just a mini instance. There's no real combat. You won't be replaying this as a DRM. But we do get to interact a bit more with Taimi, which is nice, who hasn't had enough in the Icebrood Saga, probably, at this point. It's kind of cool to see her up there on par with the other councillors. And in fact, we get to interact with some of the less known councillors as well. These guys don't speak so much, so that was pretty good. Basically, the idea here is that when you visit the chambers, Ryland, allied, obviously, with Jormag, is just sort of there as a peer among them because of this like truce from the previous patch, and it really was a cool moment when I watched that. He walks off and creates this cool portal and disappears through it. Nice animation. And this is where, of course, we learn about Primordus's minions and the idea that, well, Primordus is growing a lot and Jormag is not. She's just kind of being passive from her bargaining sort of position. So when you look at that in retrospect after the whole patch, you should realize that's a bit of a tip-off that Jormag is probably going to become active very soon. Otherwise, you know, she'll wither away in comparison to this twinned dragon, Primordus. It kind of struck me about this time in the patch, where then I got sent off to the next dragon response mission, that in a way this is kind of like what I always wanted Guild Wars to be, story-wise. I'm going to take you guys back a bit because many of you won't be in this mindset anymore, but for years and years and years with this game, people were, I think quite rightly, asking the question, why aren't the dragons doing anything? Why are we just standing around dealing with crazy Sylvari and other nonsense? Why isn't the world feeling like it's under attack? The dragons are awake. Shouldn't they be doing stuff? And, you know, ArenaNet never really had a great answer for that. They ended up putting some of the dragons to sleep. You know, they've been dicing around it. But right here, right now, in this patch, I have to compliment that I feel like Guild Wars is kind of finally resolved that problem. I feel like the world is under attack, and I'm hopping around and I've got my allies and we are trying to save people who are under duress. You know, I don't know how long this feeling can be sustained for, so I'm not saying ArenaNet should have been doing this sort of thing for the 6 years straight, don't get me wrong, but I'm saying right here, right now, it feels like we are in a good place. I kind of feel like Season 1 could have felt like this, you know, except instead of the allies we currently have, it's sort of with the Pact, right? And it's all very Pact oriented, with a Pact defense crew fighting off dragons and missions around Tyria. But of course, we are instead 7 years down the road and in a very different circumstance. At this point in the story, we travel back to Aurene because we want to ask about this thing with Jormag, and the commander has an idea to speak to Bangar specifically, not Jormag, Bangar, and see if Bangar's realized something, and the scene gets cut off. So I wonder what the commander was going to propose. Do you guys have any ideas on this? I'm very curious in your comments, and this might be one of the things a follow-up video is about, because I think that the devs are really playing with us there. So we think we're going to have a conversation, and then we're not. It turns out Lake Doric is under attack. We all think it's going to be the destroyers, of course, and in fact we have predicted that the destroyers are about to attack Lake Doric. Instead, when we arrive, we realize it is Jormag. It's the Sons of Svanir, in fact. Now, can I just say, Lake Doric looks amazing. They didn't do the thing where the water level is raised back up and then frozen over, but it doesn't really matter. This place feels so different to when we were there in Season 3. They did a fantastic job making this place look frozen and snowy and completely unique. The fact they did this so well makes me very excited about, was the data mining clue was maybe that Bloodtide Coast is going to have a similar situation? Makes me really keen. I mean, I would be happy to see this in so many different areas of Tyria. I remember years ago, people wondered if this sort of treatment would happen just when Winter's Day lands. You know, maybe the whole game should snow. Obviously, that takes a ton of effort. This was good, and the kind of war-torn, battle siege state of Lake Doric as it appeared when the White Mantle Civil War was going on, really lends itself well to now looking like dragon-inflicted devastation. So the setting was just fantastic. So the idea of the Sons of Svanir attacking is great. I think that the Sons of Svanir needed a lot more airtime in the Icebrood saga. They're a really interesting faction to me, but like so many non-related things, they kind of feel a bit flanderized, a little bit cartoonish. I've always wanted to get deeper in. And so the story here is that they lied. They said they were there to defend the place from destroyers. They get let in willingly. And then, you know, they turn on people. And that's good, you know. That's them actually being quite cunning, not being stupid idiots just following a dragon, but, you know, leveraging their sentience to some degree. So this idea really paid off for me. I wish I could have seen it a little bit more. In particular, I think what Icebrood Saga is missing is a scene with the Sons of Svanir where right when Jormag is feeling super reasonable and it seems like she's not all that bad, then we can maybe speak to the Sons of Svanir and for the first time look at them as though they're not that crazy. I think that would have been a really good scene to actually seriously empathize and think, wow, maybe they've got a point with the Sons of Svanir. Because the idea like in Holbrak where they're there and they're just sort of preaching and giving their thoughts on following Dragon as a spirit, it's supposed to be reasonable. It's supposed to be convincing, and many Norn are convinced. And so I really wish the Icebrood Saga had given us that scene, but we kind of skip over it because immediately it's like, oh, you know, they're the bad guys here again. The boss for this one is a Son of Svanir too, but probably the worst boss fight. In fact, definitely the worst boss fight that I've seen, not just in DRMs, but in any Guild Wars 2 story instance for years now. You know, this is a Season 1 quality boss fight that they give you at the end of this Lake Doric instance, which is a shame. But I really feel like this instance was pretty crunched. Like, is it just me? Or is none of the dialogue in this mission, like, written to reflect what we're actually doing? Like, the mechanics here are to defend 2 locations after the pre-events, which are pretty well done, by the way. There's a cool pre-event where you get to save a baby quaggan, and I had a lot of fun with that. But the actual mission is just, like, defend these 2 places, wave assaults. Now, if you ask me, those are some of the most simple dynamic events you can probably put in there. And the rest of all the story and the dialogue is, like, Ritlock and Logan and stuff on an adventure talking about things we can't see and that aren't happening, really, around us. I kind of like the sense that they're off on an adventure because they're heroes too and we're just not a party to it. But really, something about this instance feels fishy to me. It's not all bad because as a shorter mission, I think that means most players will end up actually quite liking it in terms of getting rewards and stuff. And, you know, as far as the story's concerned as well, it's a Logan and Ritlock mission with these 2 characters together. I adore it whenever these guys are together. They're fantastic. Though Logan doesn't really do much cool. They didn't use him well enough. He actually, one of his only lines is one of those ultra lame, like, Saturday morning cartoon lines about the power of friendship. Like, they actually stop and have a stand around in the final scene of this instance where Logan says, "We couldn't have done it if we weren't all together. All of us. Yay!" Like, great, thanks, Logan. Like, I hate lines like that. It's just filler. Come on. So, the big reveal of this instance is that Jormag is taking territory and is attacking. The truce from before is over, but she can't take territory from whatever Primordus has already claimed. So, and we've kind of already had that set up before. I'm aware that there are some kind of fringe areas of the lore that contradict this idea. And particularly when you look at the idea of dragons absorbing other dragons' magic once they've died, it can feel a bit weird. You know, the whole death-branded destroyer and stuff like that. But looking aside from that mess, the simple idea that the dragons aren't taking from one another has always really been there with the game. You know, just think about the idea that these are power-hungry, crazed things that are eating and devouring. At some point, they would have tried to devour each other. And they haven't been able to. They've always boiled down into just the 6. So there have to be these barriers there. And so I don't think that the devs are being retconny or playing with things in any kind of a weird way there. So yeah, now Jormag decided, right, if Primordus is going to take out Lake Doric, I'm going to get there first. So she jumps in a day early, and that's what we see. Now here's the nice little thing. Jormag isn't killing. While Primordus is just crazy and destroying everything, Jormag is, you remember Jormag was always saying, I'll protect you, I protect this whole thing that, you know, I'm not a bad guy, blah, blah, blah. What Jormag's doing is effectively killing people, but instead she's deep freezing. Now, this is kind of genius, I think, on the part of the writers, because none of the other dragons, well, maybe Morgemorth, you could have said something similar with the Blighting Towers and stuff, preserving people in that way, but she kind of puts you into cryo sleep, and she's like, look, you're not dead, it's okay, I'll thaw you later once I've won. I'll use this territory, I'll use what I've claimed here, and in fact, we're not hearing this from Jormag, we're hearing this all from Ryland, who pops in, and Ryland says, you know, hundreds of years later, after the commander is dead and gone, and the new world is there, then these people will rethaw. And here's a very critical thing, that might sound too reasonable, I guess, that might sound like it's actually okay. Obviously, the dragon hasn't given people the freedom to decide if that's what their fate they want, but, you know. So they actually also point out that once these people thaw, they will be serving under Ryland at that point. So there is a sense that they might be thralls of some kind. There will be, you know, no choice in what they do once they wake up. And there is still a bit of a dilemma here. You know, Jormag isn't necessarily good because she's keeping people alive. They, in fact, have a line from Ritlock where he says, you know, dead or turned to an icicle. What's the difference? The next time we get to speak to Jormag is going to be really fun because we'll actually be able to have a bit of a debate and a back and forth about this. I wonder how they'll structure that in the final 2 patches as they are upcoming. Last but not least, there is a final dragon response mission, and that's in Snowden. This is against Jormag again, but unlike with Lake Doric, we're in an environment that was already very snowy, so you might not see such a dramatic change. There is a hell of a blizzard that they've put there, though, so you can really feel the effects of the dragon activity. Now, we're in Snowden near the Owl Sanctuary, and I'm deeply ashamed to admit that I didn't realise this was going to be a story about Owl as this was going on. You know, even though we're in that area of the world, you could have even guessed this from the trailer. If you go back and look at my trailer analysis, I didn't point out that, you know, maybe they were going to do something with Owl on the map. I thought this was going to be more about the Coden, and the Coden do appear in this strike mission. Or maybe, once I loaded in as well, I thought there could even be some Lagos influence here. Because in the open world where this dragon response mission takes place, there is actually a Lagos stalking those waters. There is no Lagos, and the Coden stuff is very, very light on the ground. They don't do much, but they have a very nice comment about how Bram's weird new abilities to, like, commune or hear the spirits of the wild and this weird channeling is a lot like their voices and claws. You know how the voice communes through the mists with Coda and it speaks to them and it can drive them crazy and stuff. I hadn't made that connection at all, and then there I was playing the DRM, and the game itself prompts it through the dialogue. Really made me smile. I thought that was a pretty good one. I don't know whether they'll actually dive into that idea more, but drawing the connection was interesting. I do hope for a little more with the Coden. Looking back at the trailer for the Icebrood Saga, you had that really prominent shot of the Coden like funeral rite, I guess, as it floats off on that ice across the water. Maybe that part of the trailer represented ambitions for the Icebrood Saga that won't come to fruition now, which would be a bit of a shame, but we've had a bit, you know, with the Bone Skinner story and so on. A lot of emphasis on this mission is about Bram and the prophecy and why he's like this chosen Norn. Casimir actually comes in with the killer line, talking about how maybe the fact he's the Norn of prophecy isn't a birthright thing. Maybe it's just the decisions he's made, and he was never destined to be special, but he's made himself special, and I really quite liked that. I just feel like this moment was missing a little reference to Air. She felt a bit like an elephant in the room to me. And don't forget, many of these characters did interact with Air fairly recently in Season 4. So this mission, and the patch entirely, therefore, ends with a sequence involving Ryland and Owl. Ryland actually becomes a boss fight, which took me off guard. I didn't think they were going to do that. It's not like a major boss fight, you know, and we don't end up killing him in the story. They haven't obviously built to that, but it was nice to have a little bit of physical conflict with him. And it's to do with Owl, just to remind you all of the developments of the Owl spirit as the saga's gone along. At launch, we heard that Owl had died, protecting the Norn as they fled south. Basically, it kind of distracted and stuck with Jormag, and I think they even had a legend that it flew into Jormag's mouth or something, and was eaten and destroyed. And as soon as that spirit was destroyed, all the Norn felt it, but they had some hope, right? So this idea of the spirit of Owl was gone, and their Havroons couldn't communicate with Owl anymore. That's what we always knew. And when you play Guild Wars 2 at launch, you can see that, you know, they're in mourning and they have this ruined owl sanctuary. However, the Icebrood saga developed on this. In North Drizzlewood, we find out that Owl was not destroyed. Owl was corrupted, like some of those other spirits, Wolverine and Ox, that we were interacting with before, and were also corrupted. So when that happened to Owl, she separated herself from the mist. She went into exile, basically. That's why the Havroons couldn't communicate with her anymore, and they thought that the spirit was dead, but it wasn't. She'd just gone into hiding. Then, during the events of North Drizzlewoods, we sort of bring her back, which is all well and good and fun, right? Except now she's vulnerable again. And so here in this Dragon Response mission, Jormag's going for her and has sent Ryland. Ryland's trying to like commune and subjugate and corrupt Owl's spirit. And we have this fight to stop that from happening. So I think the devs pull a bit of a fast one on us here. Really, I think by the end of this mission, Owl should be with us and on our side or whatever. Maybe even be treated with reverence like a greater spirit of the wild or something. But instead, like, we save Owl and then they just say, oh, Owl's gone. And that's it. It feels really, really hand-wavy. And I'm not that satisfied with it, honestly. But the idea is that by the end of this patch, Owl is gone again. But this time it's for good. And there's no comebacks, and the dragon's not going to deal with Owl or anything like that. And they've kind of closed the chapter. Not very fun, really, to me, but the silver lining is there is a nice cryptic clue and mystery they set up right here. When Owl talks to Bram, Owl says, "The wild together can direct the fall. You are the harness, Norn of prophecy." And Casimir specifically calls attention to that line again. The wild together can direct the fall. This somehow is meant to explain how this prophecy comes true and how it works with the two dragons being twinned and all of this weird stuff going on with the destroyers, perhaps. I really think that this is the main thing we should be thinking about. So whatever you guys have for preliminary ideas, feel free to drop them below. And I'd like to dive into this subject material again, if not for this next Dragon Response mission patch, but definitely by the last one, because I really do think there's some good stuff here. The last thing I'll note about this DRM as well on mechanics is that the Ryland fight was actually pretty good. It probably had the most amazing, most fun dodge telegraph I've ever experienced in the game. Like, really clean, really clear when you want to dodge, how the timing works, how regularly it comes up. You've always had enough time to, you know, regenerate enough endurance. It's just super, super satisfying, very easy. This dodge animation that we have on Ryland here, I think is the kind of dodge animation that should be getting used around like the level 20 personal story to teach people how to dodge. But here we have it years later in around a bit of the end game. ArenaNet should reuse this over and over and over again. This is a great little thing that I would love to see on a ton of different fights. And so, well, there you have it. That's Chapter 2 Power. That's how it concludes, very suddenly, just like this video will now feel like it's going to conclude suddenly. I really wanted another conversation at Eye of the North, but unless I'm missing something, there isn't one. We're just, once again, waiting now. The chapter doesn't even conclude in the story journal for the next part to come out, and we get to continue playing along. So let me know what some of your thoughts are, guys. I will be eagerly reading the comments below, and we may even get some back and forth on this. Thank you all. Don't forget that I've got a series going on at the moment about the expansion, a daily Q&A discussion show. You do not have to watch the earlier ones. You can just jump right on in at any point. And I'll be back for more video ideas very soon. I still want to talk about tonics and strike missions and all those good things. Keep an eye out. Thanks, guys. I'll see you next time. Hopefully we can have a lot to talk about and to do while waiting for this next release. I appreciate we're in a bit of a weird time with Guild Wars at the moment. See you soon.